The sun was just beginning to sink behind the tall red rocks of the desert. The evening air grew cooler, carrying the soft sound of wind through the canyon. Birds were returning to their nests, and the ground was slowly losing the heat it had gathered during the day. Ayanna walked quietly, her bare feet making almost no sound on the dusty path. Her heart was beating faster with every step. She knew what waited ahead would not be easy. Thomas Everett stood near the old cottonwood tree where they had often met. He was a tall man with tired blue eyes that had seen many hard years. His hands were rough from work, but his face carried a softness that only appeared when he looked at her. Tonight that softness was gone. His jaw was tight and his eyes were filled with questions he could no longer keep inside. For weeks the space between them had grown heavy with silence. Ayanna had tried to speak, but words had always been lost on the wind. She had a secret she had kept buried inside her heart, a secret that had caused this painful distance. She wished she could turn back time, but the truth stood like a tall wall between them. Thomas turned when he heard her footsteps. His hat was pulled low over his brow, but she could still see the pain written on his face. He took a slow step forward and stopped. Ayanna's breath caught in her throat. She could not run now, not anymore. "You knew," he said quietly. His voice was not loud, but it carried more weight than a shout ever could. "You knew what was coming that night." She lowered her eyes. Her hands twisted together nervously. The word fell weakly from her lips. "I trusted you," Thomas said. He took another step closer, and Ayanna could see how tired he looked. Not just tired from the long days of hard work, but tired from carrying a wound inside his heart. "I trusted you more than anyone, and you didn't tell me." Ayanna felt her throat tighten. She wanted to explain, but how could she make him understand? Her people and his people did not trust each other. Every word, every action was a careful step between two worlds. If she had spoken too soon, she could have lost everything: her family, her place among her people, and even him. But now her silence had cost her something even greater, his trust. "Thomas," she whispered, her voice breaking. He didn't look at her. He looked at the horizon where the sun was almost gone. "All this time I thought you were different," he said slowly. "I thought what we had was real." "It was real," she said quickly, lifting her head. Her eyes were wide, full of pain. "It is real." He shook his head slightly, not in anger, but in deep hurt. "Then why didn't you tell me?" Ayanna stepped forward, but the space between them felt like a river too wide to cross. Her heart beat loudly in her ears. "Because I was scared," she said softly. "I was scared to lose you. I was scared to lose everything." Thomas finally looked at her then. His eyes searched her face as if he was trying to see the truth behind her words. "You don't keep something like that from someone you love," he said. "Not if it matters." Ayanna felt tears rise, but she held them back. She didn't want him to see her break down. She had always been strong. Her people respected her for her calm heart. But tonight, strength felt heavy, like a stone she could no longer carry. The wind grew stronger, lifting a few strands of her long black hair and brushing them across her face. The smell of sage filled the air. The desert around them seemed quiet, as if it too was listening. "You don't understand," Ayanna said softly. "If I had told you, my people would have turned against me. And your people," she stopped, because the truth was too sharp to say out loud. "No one would have let us stay together. No one." Thomas let out a long, tired breath. "And now look where we are," he said. "You didn't trust me. How am I supposed to trust you now?" Ayanna felt her knees grow weak. She dropped down to the ground slowly, the soft dust rising around her. She bowed her head, not out of shame, but out of a feeling she could not describe. She had never begged anyone in her life. But tonight she was ready to give up her pride. "Please," she whispered. Her hands rested on the earth. "Please listen to me." Thomas didn't move, but he didn't walk away either. He stood there, his shadow growing long in the fading light. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said. "I was trying to protect both of us. I thought if I stayed quiet, things would get better. But they didn't. They got worse." Her voice cracked as she spoke. All the fear, the sleepless nights, the heavy secret in her heart, they poured out now like water breaking through a dam. She lifted her head, and for the first time that night Thomas saw how scared she truly was. "I'm carrying your child," she said softly. The words trembled in the air like a fragile leaf. "I was going to tell you. I just didn't know how." Thomas froze. His breath caught in his chest. For a long time there was only silence. The world seemed to stop. The crickets, the wind, the rustling leaves, everything fell quiet. Ayana felt the world spinning around her. She searched his face, looking for a sign, anything that would tell her what he was feeling, but Thomas's face was unreadable. His hands hung loosely at his sides and his eyes were wide, as if he had been hit by a wave he didn't see coming. "I thought if I told you," Ayana whispered, "you would turn away. I didn't want you to hate me. I didn't want our child to be born into hate." Thomas took a slow step forward. His boots crunched softly on the sand. His voice, when it came, was quiet. "Our child?" She nodded slowly, tears finally falling down her cheeks. "Yes." He looked at her then, not with anger but with something far more complicated. He saw not just the woman in front of him, but everything that came with her. Her people, his people, the history between them, the weight of their different worlds. And now, a new life was growing in the middle of it all. "I wanted to tell you," Ayana said again. "I wanted to do the right thing, but I didn't know what the right thing was." Thomas's mind raced. He had spent years living on this land, learning its ways, finding a fragile peace among people who were not his own. But he had never imagined this. He had lost his wife years ago, and with her he thought he had lost the chance to be a father again. Now this woman, this strong and quiet woman, was carrying his child, and yet a wall of pain still stood between them. The last light of the sun painted the sky in soft orange and pink. Ayana's face was wet with tears, but her eyes did not look away from him. She had nothing left to hide. "I can't change the past," she said quietly, "but I can promise you the truth from now on. Please, Thomas, have mercy on me. Please forgive me." The words fell gently, almost like a prayer. She wasn't just asking for forgiveness for herself. She was asking for a future for their child, for a chance to build something new out of broken trust. Thomas felt his heart ache. He had imagined many endings to their story, but not this one. He had imagined anger, walking away, or silence. But now, as he looked down at her trembling hands, at the woman he loved begging him not to give up on her, his heart felt pulled in two directions. The night grew darker, the first stars appearing in the wide sky above them. The soft sound of a nearby stream reached their ears. Everything felt still and fragile, as if one wrong word could shatter it all. Thomas slowly knelt down in front of her. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at her face, the face that had once made him feel hope after years of loneliness, the same face that had hidden a painful truth. "I don't know what to do," he admitted softly. His voice shook a little, and Ayana could hear the hurt behind it. "I trusted you with everything, and now I don't even know how to feel." Ayana reached out slowly, her hands trembling. She didn't touch him, not yet, but her eyes held his, steady and full of quiet courage. "I will spend the rest of my life proving to you that I will never hide from you again," she said. "Not for me, not even for myself, but for you, and for our child." The wind brushed gently between them, carrying the scent of earth and sage. For a long moment they just knelt there, two souls caught between the pain of yesterday and the possibility of tomorrow. Thomas finally lowered his gaze to the ground, and Ayana closed her eyes. She didn't know what his answer would be, but she had given him her truth, and that for now was all she could give. Above them, the stars grew brighter. The night wrapped around the desert like a quiet promise, uncertain, fragile, but still alive. The night had grown quiet. The stars above the desert shone like tiny silver lamps scattered across a deep, endless sky. Ayana sat on the cool ground, her hands resting on her knees, her heart still beating fast from everything she had confessed. She had no idea what Thomas would decide. She had given him her truth, but truth alone did not heal broken trust. It only opened the door for what might come next. Thomas sat a few steps away, his back leaning against the old cottonwood tree. The same tree where he had once laughed with her, shared quiet moments, and dreamed of a peaceful life. Now that same tree stood between what they had been and what they might become. He stared at the stars, but his thoughts were tangled and heavy. He had always believed in being strong. Life in the desert demanded it. But tonight strength felt different. It wasn't about being hard or turning away. It was about carrying a weight inside his heart that had no easy answer. Ayana's words replayed in his mind. "I can make you a dad if you forgive me." At the time, they had cut deep. But the longer he sat there, the more he realized they weren't just words. They were a promise, a plea, and a new beginning wrapped together. Ayana wrapped her shawl around her shoulders as the night breeze grew cooler. She glanced at Thomas, unsure if she should speak again. A part of her wanted to run, to escape the weight of his silence. But another part of her, stronger and braver, knew she had to stay. She loved this man. She loved the life growing inside her, and she would not let fear take everything away. Finally, Thomas let out a slow breath. "Do you remember the night we first met here?" he asked softly, still looking at the stars. Ayana's heart gave a small jump. She nodded, though he couldn't see it clearly in the dark. "Yes," she whispered. "You were gathering herbs," he said, his voice quieter now, almost like he was talking to himself. "I thought you were a spirit at first. You moved so quietly through the night." She gave a small, sad smile. "You looked lost," she said softly, like someone searching for a home he couldn't find. Thomas let out a small laugh, not loud but real. "I was," he admitted. "I had been lost for a long time." Ayana felt her throat tighten again. "And then you found me." He turned his head slightly, just enough to see her face in the moonlight. There were tears still shining on her cheeks, but there was also something else, a quiet strength. The same strength that had drawn him to her in the first place. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The world around them seemed still, like the desert itself was waiting to see what would happen next. Finally, Thomas stood up slowly. Ayana's heart began to race again. She watched him carefully, afraid of what he might say. He walked a few steps closer to her. The soft sound of his boots on the sand seemed louder in the silence. He stopped just in front of her, looking down at the woman who had changed his life in ways he had never expected. "I don't know how to forget what happened," Thomas said gently, "but I also don't know how to walk away from you." Ayana's lips trembled as she tried to hold back new tears. "I'm not asking you to forget," she said softly. "I'm asking you to let me fix what I broke." Thomas slowly lowered himself down to sit in front of her. His hands rested on his knees. His face still carried the weight of everything they had been through, but there was a softness returning to his eyes. "I never thought I'd be a father again," he said quietly. "I never thought I'd have someone who made me want to stay in one place." Ayana reached out her hand slowly. She didn't touch him at first, only let her hand rest in the space between them. "Then stay," she whispered. "Not because of me. Because of us. Because of the life growing inside me." The wind blew gently through the canyon, carrying the sound of the stream nearby. Thomas felt something shift inside his heart. Not a sudden forgiveness, not a perfect answer, but a small light where there had been only pain before. He reached out his hand and covered hers. Her fingers were cold, but her touch felt warm. In that moment, they didn't need big promises. The quiet touch between them spoke more than words could. Days turned into weeks. Life in the desert moved forward as it always did. The sun rose each morning, casting golden light over the canyons. The wind carried the scent of sage and earth. And slowly, little by little, Thomas and Ayana began to rebuild what had been broken. Thomas started visiting Ayana's village again, not as a stranger, but as someone trying to belong. At first, the people looked at him with suspicion. They had heard stories, and trust didn't come easily. But Ayana stood by him, her chin lifted, her voice steady. She spoke to her people with quiet strength, asking them to give him a chance. She also began to visit Thomas's side of the settlement more often. The people there weren't much different. Some looked at her with doubt. Some whispered. But Thomas stood beside her, protecting her not with force but with calm presence. Every time someone asked why, he answered simply, "Because she's my family." It wasn't easy. There were days when old fears came back. There were moments when trust felt fragile again. But each day they chose to keep walking together. Ayana spent her days helping the sick, collecting herbs, and teaching Thomas more about her people's ways. He spent his time building a small home near the cottonwood tree. Their place, the place where everything had changed. As her belly grew, so did their quiet bond. At night, they would sit under the stars talking softly. Ayana told stories from her people's past, tales of courage, love, and forgiveness. Thomas shared stories of his childhood, of a life far away that felt like another lifetime. Slowly, they began to write their own story between those stars. One evening, Ayana woke up to the soft sound of rain. It was rare in the desert, but that night the sky opened gently. She stepped outside, feeling the cool drops on her skin. Thomas followed her, a warm blanket around his shoulders. They stood together in the soft rain, their faces lifted to the sky. It feels like the earth is breathing, she whispered. Thomas smiled softly. It feels like a new beginning. Ayanna placed his hand gently on her growing belly. He felt the warmth beneath her shawl and something inside him melted. This wasn't just about forgiveness anymore. It was about becoming something more than either of them had ever imagined. It was about building a bridge between two worlds with love, patience, and hope. As the weeks passed, the people from both sides slowly began to see what was happening. They saw Thomas helping build shelters for the elders in Ayanna's village. They saw Ayanna teaching children songs that mixed both their languages. And slowly, walls began to lower, not just between Thomas and Ayanna, but between everyone. The cottonwood tree became a place of quiet gatherings. People sat under its branches listening to Ayanna's stories and Thomas's soft laughter. It was a small, quiet change, but it was real. On a cool evening, not long before the child was expected, Thomas took Ayanna's hands in his. The sun was setting, painting the sky with soft gold and pink. The world around them felt still, as if holding its breath. "I don't know what kind of father I'll be," Thomas said softly, "but I promise I'll never walk away from you, or from our child." Ayanna's eyes filled with gentle tears. "And I promise to stand beside you," she said. "Not behind you, beside you." They leaned their foreheads together, feeling the soft beat of each other's hearts. For the first time in a long time, the fear inside Ayanna began to fade. For the first time, Thomas felt like he truly had a home. The night their child was born, the stars were brighter than ever. The wind was soft, and the world seemed to pause to welcome the tiny life that had brought two hearts together. Thomas held the small, warm bundle in his arms, his eyes filled with wonder. Ayanna, tired but glowing, watched him with quiet joy. He looked down at their child, a small, perfect piece of both of them. In that moment, everything made sense. All the pain, the fear, the silence, the tears, they had led them here. Ayanna reached out and touched the baby's tiny hand. Thomas covered her hand with his. There were no big speeches, no grand celebrations. Just a quiet promise that from this moment on, they would walk together. The cottonwood tree stood tall outside, its branches swaying gently in the night breeze. It had witnessed their pain, their confession, their forgiveness, and now their beginning as a family. In the months that followed, their lives were not perfect. There were still differences to face and challenges to meet. But now they faced them together, and that made all the difference. Their child grew up surrounded by stories from both sides, learning two languages, two traditions, and one great love that had built a bridge no one thought possible. And every time Ayanna passed by the old cottonwood tree, she remembered the night she fell to her knees and begged for forgiveness, not out of weakness, but out of love. That night had changed everything. That night had given them a future, and under that same tree years later their child would play, laugh, and remind everyone who passed by that forgiveness is not just a word. It is a seed, and when planted with love it grows into something beautiful.